You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures. Saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It's takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
Good evening, everybody. It is Monday, January 28th. I know that because I just had to pay my mortgage, so I didn't destroy my credit rating. It is 9 o'clock p.m. You are listening to For Immediate Release. I'm Bill O'Reilly, and I'm joined by my partner, Liz Neuer-Feld. How are you tonight, Liz?
I'm great, Billy, and I thought you were going to say that you knew it was January 28th because two of your siblings have birthdays today, but your other reason is totally legit.
That was my next shout out. Exactly. I have two. We have in the O'Reilly family, there were 6 of us, as Liz well knows, and 2 were born a year apart on January 28th. So kind of Irish twins and kind of twins. And then we have another sister that was born a year later on January 16th. And for years and years, my father just outright fibbed on plane rides and on buses, saying that he had children 3 years in a row on January 28th. So. But yes, so happy birthday to Jerry and Priscilla, who may not be listening tonight. But also, I'm glad I got the mortgage in before they come and destroy my credit rating.
Oh, that's the pressure on that is the worst. Speaking of bills that arrived, I don't know if you get Con Ed, but I have Con Edison, and as my brother Larry used to say, God bless him, emphasis on the con. $636 in gas charges for the month of from December 23rd to January 23rd. Now, I'm going to go through this, and I would tell you, I live in a teeny tiny mouse house. So I don't know who these folks are kidding, and I don't know what the recourse is and how you actually measure these things in metric or cubic, whatever they do. But I got news for you. That's not going to cut it. It's not going to. I'm going to do something about it. I've never seen anything like it. And
no, it's funny you mentioned Larry, my father. Always when he was alive, he always, for years and years, and he's a very nice guy and didn't like to bust anybody's chops, but he always put con in quotes when he sent his check back into Con Ed.
There you go.
Yeah, he honestly did. It was just his little way of getting back. I don't know if anyone noticed it, but he knew it. But Liz, you're so right. When we first moved from New York City to where I am now in Westchester, and you factor in what's the mortgage going to cost, what are the taxes, what are the rest of it. In the first month, we got a bill for $1,200, and I thought, like I did for heat. It turned out that the heater wasn't working properly, but it finally got down a little bit. But that's just crazy, your numbers. I mean, we do it, we even it out over the year so that it's not so killer in the winter. But that's bananas. I mean, that's just nuts.
Yep, and I find, and again, like I said, I have a mouse house also. We're not here all day. We're at work. The temperature's down. It's not like I'm trying to keep a little baby warm in the middle of the night. The whole thing's a racket. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know what the recourse is, but I've now had it. I'm going to look into it.
Yeah, you should. I mean, the prices that are really different between the different agencies. I know in New York, Con Ed is always the most expensive. Interestingly, I'm not sure if you saw the story. Con Ed announced last week or 10 days ago that they will no longer be taking new gas customers in New York. at least in the lower regions of New York, because they don't have enough of it. And, there's a big energy crisis coming in New York because everybody's been trying to get rid of everything other than, solar and wind, and they're closing Indian Point, and there's just not enough power. Every time there's a new gas line proposed, people demonstrate and march and knock it back. And you can't get, certainly you can't get coal-fired plants up anymore, or everybody, will flip out, and maybe rightly, but it's become a problem. But boy, that's crazy, Liz. That's nuts.
Well, Billy, a couple of years ago, there was all over New York State, a big protest against proposed fracking. And there were folks all up and down the main streets of Larchmont with petitions saying, will you please sign our petition saying you're against fracking? And I would say to every single one of them, not on your life am I signing a petition. To say I'm against fracking. What, as you just correctly pointed out, what do these folks think we're going to do? We can't all live on solar, not where we live. In Arizona you can, but not in my house where I am. I couldn't sustain my year-round needs on solar energy. Can you?
No, and you can't win with anything you do. If you do the wind energy, you get protesters saying that you're ruining the vistas looking into the ocean. No matter what you do, there seems to be opposition. Like Indian Point in New York was very energy efficient, completely safe, regardless of what people said. It provided about 35% of the electricity to New York City and to Lower Westchester. And that's now supposedly, shutting next year, which is no way it's going to happen. There's just no way to replace that energy. And they don't want nuclear. You don't want fracking. They don't like the look of wind turbines. But meanwhile, I'm looking around the room that I'm in right now. I have a computer on, a phone on, a speaker on, lights on. We're adding things every minute. So, and I don't think it's just, I don't think liberals are not using devices either. Or any fewer devices, I should say.
And so you were very involved for years working for Rob Astorino, the eminent former Westchester County executive here, in the battle over closing Indian Point. That's actually since the day I moved back to New York in 2000 was, a pitched battle, day in and day out. But that battle was lost by these pro-nuclear energy, frankly, what I would say pro-national security folks around here.
Well, basically they just harassed it until it finally said we're getting out of here, and they agreed to shut down, and they cut a deal with Governor Cuomo. But it just I don't think it was worth it to them. They were constantly sued, constantly in court, constantly questioned. And I don't mean to be shilling for Indian Point. I didn't really care where the energy was coming from. My argument was that if you like to have lights on, then you probably want Indian Point to continue. Because without it, that's just not going to happen. There's no replacements, and there's parts, this area of the countries that are facing the same thing, or of course out west, water issues. These are real issues that are sneaking up on the country, and you just can't have it both ways. And I agree. We want to shift over, systematically over the things that aren't going to poison the atmosphere. Totally get it. But to me, nuclear is a pretty good. It's a pretty good system. It's clean. It's efficient. It's relatively cheap, and you get rid of it, and you end up with $600 bills like you're getting, Liz. And I bet most of that energy is coming from coal-fired plants.
Well, having options, as we all know, is critically important both for economic security, national security, personal, liberties. And I feel like we're completely trapped by these monopolies around here across the board.
And there are a lot in cable and in everything. In everything.
Yeah, yes, and we could talk about that too. Do you have what do you have over there, Verizon?
I have Verizon Fios because I do a weekly show with Richard Bruskett, a former assemblyman from New York who's really smart on the left and very bright guy. And so I get Fios as a result of that. But there's really only two options, where I am, and the price just went up again. I just went up another $30 or something for the 2-year contract. It's a lot. It's funny, Liz, that you mentioned that. I was thinking a couple of nights ago, maybe it was when I was renewing. But I remember when cable television first came around, and there were certain, families that had HBO, and I thought they just have money to throw away. It was like $40 a month or something, or $20 a month to get HBO. early 80s, and they were just, my family would never get HBO and never did. And I mean, it just would never happen. It wasn't even, and HBO was it was that, and I think the Movie Channel was the other one. But it was just, there were some families that just had cash to throw around and to do that, and others saw it as a complete waste. And now you think about how much we spend on cell phones, on cable, on Wi-Fi. I mean, it's, now phones are free, but free has never felt so expensive in my life.
That is so well said. It's so well said. Oh, Lord. So we have a lot of ground to cover. There's been a lot of news over the last few days. Well, I guess we could start with Howard Schultz and work backwards. Howard Schultz, as I've said, I should have been the first shareholder in Starbucks. I don't know if anyone spends as much money on coffee as I do. But I wonder what you think about his announcement last night on 60 Minutes that he is examining, or I guess he's decided that he wants to run as an independent candidate for president in 2020.
I've got to say first that I made a bold prediction about 20 years ago that Starbucks would never make it in New York. I said, there's no way you're going to pay bucks for a cup of coffee. New York was like a chock full of nuts, 50 cents coffee, kind of the Greek deli thing. You got the cup with the Parthenon on it. And it was like, there's no way New Yorkers are going to do that. And about 2 weeks later, everybody was lined up, including me. With cash in hand, give me the stuff. So, yeah, I've given Schultz a lot of my own money as well. I don't know what I think. And that's, I'd love to hear your take on it too, Liz. I mean, I love the idea, and that's really kind of the issue or the topic of the day or week or possibly even this year and next is, does it make sense for a real independent to run? And the Democratic Party is freaking out, obviously, saying that they don't want Schultz to run. Former Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who is likely to run as a Democrat in the race, made it clear today that he doesn't think it's good for Schultz to run or an independent because it would reelect Trump. These are, some people who don't like Trump. What do you think? I think it's got to be the more the merrier, regardless of what of what predictions are out there for what might happen in a multi-party field. I think everybody should have their say. It's my gut, but I could be dissuaded.
Well, I think you're right about the more the merrier, period. I always think that, unless I'm running, and then I'd like to run unopposed. But I thought it was very interesting that Schultz himself pointed out that he has for years, unlike the Democrats, even though he's been a Democrat his whole life, I think, that he's been talking about the debt and the deficit and what it's doing to the overall financial integrity of the country, which you just don't hear the Democrats talking about that. I mean, he actually talks about the underlying, the problems there, and he doesn't completely default to the raising taxes and how horrible the Republicans are. But other than that, I don't know what his platform would be. I guess he's running as a sort of a typical socially liberal, moderate on the fiscal stuff with a sane approach to the debt and to the deficit. But other than that, I mean, I don't know what his appeal would be. I really couldn't tell you. I tell you, he's up against this absolute onslaught of Democratic candidates. Is it one a day we're now getting in the race? I mean, at this rate, we're going to have 50 candidates by the time June rolls around. But I think it's going to be tough. He did say he would self-fund, didn't he? Most likely.
Yeah, he said he would self-fund. I don't know if he's famous enough, and he's gotten a lot of press attention over the years. I always liked him because without trumpeting it too much, he was giving health care to his employees and doing nice things. It was his philosophy as a private business, and I like that very much. I don't think that health care is a absolute right and the government has to give it. I don't believe that. I don't believe housing is a right. I don't believe a job is a right. I don't. But the fact that he was doing it as a private businessman, I completely respect it. And hopefully other people would do that as well. He's been on 60 Minutes. He's had lots of coverage over the years, but I don't think he's famous enough. But that said, money can buy fame in television advertising. I don't know. I know he has billions of dollars. I don't know how many billions. And I guess there's some estimates out there. I think Bloomberg has a lot more billions than he has. but he could certainly inject himself into the conversation pretty quickly, and he doesn't have to spend, if he runs as an independent, which he's indicating that he will, he doesn't have to spend his dollars in a primary, getting chewed up, state by state. He can save them and go national and go, target it when he needs to. So, I love the debt. Just to follow up, I love the debt conversation, Liz. If he's talking about the debt, I want to listen to him. I'll listen to anything else he says.
Yeah. No, and it's real, and he's an adult. It's interesting. Did you see the article, the Frank Bruni's column in the New York Times yesterday about Gina Raimondo, the governor of Rhode Island, the Democratic governor?
I did not. I usually read Bernie, and I did not see that one.
So it's an excellent column. I've actually had a chance to meet her when she was running the first time around. She was just reelected. And she
was a controller for a while?
Yes, and she was a business person. She went to Harvard, and then I think she was at Goldman Sachs. She was in business for a while. But she was saying how the left hates her. And her exact quote was, none of these lefties can win, and I don't know why they're angry at me. They call her a corporatist because she believes strongly that the party should be about work and the right to work, and not the right to work in the union sense of the word, that they should be a party of work and for jobs, and the Democrats think she's a sellout. And she's done a wonderful job in Rhode Island. She's actually really straddled this sort of, we're not New York and we're not Boston, we're in between. So she's talked a lot of companies into relocating their back office stuff and their legal and their accounting in Providence, which was not in Bruni's column. His column was political, but she's quietly done an excellent job. She's done a lot on prison reform, but she was basically sending a warning signal to her colleagues in the Democratic Party, and she was the head of the Governors Association for a while, the DGA, I guess, that, hey, we can't be so extreme here. She doesn't understand why they hate millionaires. I mean, she was very direct about it. But, you saw it again. Did you see the turnout at Kamala Harris's announcement? It was bigger than Tom Brady turned off. It was bigger than the New England Patriots rally at Gillette. It was incredible.
I saw the photo. That was pretty incredible. Yeah.
Now,
maybe it's right too. But I mean, that's a real concern, obviously a legitimate concern for the Democratic Party, but for anybody who wants to see a healthy political race is, you have, I mean, the beating up of people that have done well in the country is just dumb as far as I'm concerned. Bill de Blasio's out there now, and he's pushing there's plenty of money out there, but it's all in the wrong hands, and he's all redistributionist. And he talks as though the same thing that who was the filmmaker that did Roger and Me and all the Ford stuff, exactly, Michael Moore. They always talk about money as though it's a zero-sum game. They don't seem to understand that wealth is created, that you can take a napkin and turn it in and fold it into a rose and it's worth more than the napkin. Suddenly you've just created, whatever the extra value is. And they seem to think that there's one pot of money and that rich people took it all. And there's not enough left for poor people. And I'm not saying that the income disparity in the country isn't concerning, and that I don't wish that it would be better spread, because I do. We could use a little bit here ourselves. But they just don't seem to understand basic economics, and that's where the party's going with the Ocasio-Cortezes and the rest. It's bananas.
Well, and Elizabeth Warren tried to top this with Ocasio-Cortez and the millionaire, her ultra millionaire tax now. I don't know what comes after ultra. But something evil. I found, and you and I did talk about this after our show last week, between then and today we've had, this whole discussion about how immoral the border wall is, and now billionaires are immoral, and yet Cuomo thinks it's not immoral at all to pass the most sweeping, appalling, immoral legislation around partial birth abortion. I've never seen anything like it. It makes me sick to my stomach. 9 months full-term pregnancy, and it's legal in New York to have an abortion. That's not immoral, but it's immoral to be a billionaire and to make some money. And then the very next breath, I don't know if you saw this, he had the nerve to tweet out that he and the Pope are in complete agreement about the death penalty. There should be no death penalty. We shouldn't be murdering people. Is this cognitive dissonance? I don't understand it. I don't know how he gets away with it. I don't know what people in the country are thinking. It makes me sick, physically sick.
Yeah, it does to me too, Liz. And just to explain to people that are listening who may not be from the Northeast, just to explain what this bill is, I know it well because I worked against it for 7 or 8 years, and we were able to keep it from – it always passed the Democratic Assembly in New York by fairly wide numbers, but it was always blocked in the Senate. We were able to keep it locked up through the efforts of a lot of people who nicely were willing to fund campaigns against it. But New York was the abortion was legalized in New York in 1970, 4 years before Roe v. Wade. It was one of the earliest states to pass abortion, laws or I guess rights as they'll call it. And there's no question that abortion isn't going anywhere in New York. It's a completely Democratic run state. The Democratic Assembly was always in charge and by 100 members. It's not going anywhere. In New York also, it's the state with the most amount of abortions in the country. There was 10 years ago, we did some studies and there was 61% of African American pregnancies were terminated. 61%. Just crazy numbers. And the political left decided that it was a good idea and really frankly the abortion industry was pushing this, that it was a good political issue to raise hysteria out there that the Republicans were going to take away, abortion rights in New York State. And so they said, let's codify Roe v. Wade in New York, even though Planned Parenthood versus Casey is the prevailing law in the country. And so they put in a bill that would do a couple of things, actually really 3 things, but 2 especially important. One was remove all restrictions on abortion up to 9 months, right up until birth, where it wouldn't be the life of the mother, it was the health of the mother, and the health was defined as anything, meaning it could be emotional, it could be just I don't want the child. You could do for any reason up to 9 months. And the other thing that the bill does is allow non-doctors to perform abortions in New York. And that was the abortion industry trying to get some rates down in certain places, which means, of course, that people without money were going to go to the non-doctors. But you're right, Liz, I find it difficult to talk about the bill. And what made me absolutely sick, and a lot of people around the country saw this video, were the Democrats in Albany cheering about this law going through, and the Freedom Tower of all buildings, the Freedom Tower going pink that night to celebrate abortion at 9 months for any reason, which to me is nothing but murder. I mean, that's just the Archbishop called it genocide here, and he's right. And there's some talk about Cuomo being excommunicated from the Catholic Church. And I doubt that goes anywhere, but I think it rises to that level.
There are so many. First of all, thank you for sharing all that background, because I live here and I didn't know all of it, so enormously helpful. People around the rest of the country listening to this will probably get aghast. Maybe I don't know what the runner-up states would be, but New York's a runaway winner for the world's worst moral leadership. And again, the fact that Cuomo would then actually tie himself to the Pope there's something so twisted about that. Is that his guilty conscience? I don't know. The fact that the Pope doesn't actually, for all comments that this Pope or the issues that he weighs in on and gets involved in politics, the fact that he doesn't call Cuomo out for this really bothers me. It really bothers me. He's talked about, how he wants us to be kinder and gentler around immigration and other things, but here we have a clear example of a governor from arguably the most important state in the country, certainly when it comes to influencing the economy and leadership, to sit here and stand by and say nothing. And I didn't see anything coming out of anybody else. Did you see any Republican governors around the country weighing in on any of this? Because I didn't.
No, I did notice it. I got a request for a quote today from one of the publications here asking why not a single Republican voted for this, though, which I thought was great. And they were looking for some cynical reason for it. Are they afraid of this party or that party? And it was like, how about, conscience? But no, I didn't hear a lot of people weighing in on it. And you're right. I'm not the biggest. As a Catholic, it's a terrible thing to say you don't like your Pope very much, but I don't like my Pope very much. I don't think he's a big fan of our country, and I think he's a knee-jerk socialist, frankly, and which is probably why he doesn't fire back at Governor Cuomo.
Yeah,
but I got to tell you, Cardinal Dolan, the Archbishop of New York, Cardinal Dolan, has not held back. And Dolan is a Dolan. He's got a backbone. He's a very good speaker. And when you rile him up, he'll make it, he'll let you know that he's not happy, and he's been doing that.
But I did see the video of the cheering, and it did make me sick. And also, let's just talk about priorities. The fact that 5 minutes after, the governor is sworn in again and the Democrats take over, this was, number one on their list? Number two? New York State's a mess on so many levels. We can get the metrics out again, but we don't want to bore our listeners because they hear us go on about this all the time. But the fact that this is what took priority, and look, we've got Kirsten Gillibrand running for president, and this is one of her big issues. I don't think there's anything that there is no depth to which she wouldn't sink to pander. And I guess I'm speechless. I'm just speechless.
I know we weren't even planning. I'm glad you brought this up. I know we weren't even planning to talk about it, but it didn't get worked on this year because there's the Republicans lost the majority by massive numbers in the 2018 elections. But we did a lot of work on this, and there was some very good polling done by McLaughlin Associates. And I think Jim McLaughlin was on our show a while back. His brother John did the polling in this case. It was for an organization called Chiaroscuro Foundation. And we polled, it was a really straight up poll, no tricks to it, not trying to get certain answers out of it. It was a, straight up, very well done, very comprehensive poll. And even pro-choice Democratic women were like wildly against abortion at 9 months, late-term abortion. You found that most people, pretty much a pro-choice state, it was like, 55%, something in that range. But there was a lot of gray area in the middle, and virtually nobody wanted what that bill represented. It was, and we even did focus groups on it. We had somebody come in that does very, very high-end focus groups, very scientifically complex focus groups, and we brought in people, it's particularly independent women and Democratic women that called themselves liberal, and we ran through this issue. And once they heard the holes in this law that would allow abortion that late for no reason or for any reason, you just watched their faces drop through the glass, and it was striking. A lot of people in this country don't realize that even in what we consider incredibly liberal countries like France and Germany, abortion has always been regulated to under 20 weeks or less. And the U.S. is one of the very few countries, Canada and not the other one, might be North Korea or something, that allows abortion as late as we do. But what New York just did is, you shudder before God when you, if you believe in a God, and I do, you shudder before God that man is acting this way. Just that bad.
How do we, as a society, put aside your politics and your party, do we reconcile this with all of this concern, some of it obviously genuine, some of it political, just trumped up, over the separation of families at the border, and how can we treat young children like this, and we're snatching babies from their parents' arms, literally, 6 months old. How do we, and then we turn around and cheer at something like this? I don't know how there's any big difference between, if you're talking about life here and children and vulnerable children and the most vulnerable, and does this all really boil down to women's rights?
And you also talk about there's selective abortions, and they don't show up in the statistics, but people know they occur, where somebody goes into a doctor's office and says, well, I wanted a boy this time, or I wanted a girl this time.
Right.
And it's like, that's sick to me. I mean, it's so crazy. Liz, you're right. It's so hypocritical. It's so twisted. Chiaroscuro, the last time I worked with them, and they were also doing a lot of work to help young mothers or expectant mothers who were in low income, in very difficult shape, and they wanted to give them help to make the best decision they could, and hopefully they would make the decision to have the child. And they realized that the law's the law, and people do make their own choices in these matters in this country. And so they're trying to do the right thing. And one of the things that Garris Gerd Foundation tried to do was to get the health department in New York State to oversee the abortion clinics around the state, and there were, a couple hundred of them. There's no health department regulations on it. And so we publicized the Yelp ratings. Imagine there's Yelp ratings for abortion clinics. And the reviews were horrifying. We made radio ads out of them, and it was women saying, this place is filthy, it's disgusting. This wasn't trying to get a clinic shut down. It was trying to get it clean. And Garris Gerd was saying, if someone's going to do it, you want them to be safe. We want them not to do this. But they're trying to do the right thing, and it got the Democratic Party wouldn't budge on it. They wouldn't touch it. So it's like you regulate a nail salon in New York, you regulate a pizzeria, a barber, but you're not doing health inspections for abortion clinics? I mean, come on.
I'm stunned. I really am stunned. Is there, what other states are as bad as we are? I would suspect California.
Yeah, there's actually, we used a lot of the data that Garris Gerd used came from a group that is actually pro-abortion called the Guttmacher Institute. And they have, their data is very, very good and very accurate and very impartial. And so Guttmacher, their stuff is very good. So people can look it up and see what the rates are, what the ratios are for live births to abortions in the country. The good news actually is that the rates of abortions have actually been plummeting in the last decade around the country, especially among young people. There has been a change, and I think part of it is the advent of 3D sonograms and other technology that shows young people that is no blob inside, that's a human being. And maybe, Plan B stuff may be in play there as well. But abortion rates have actually been going down, steadily and pretty systematically, which is the good news of it. But what New York just did, it just flies in the other direction. And, you got to pray that nobody takes them up on the new law, because that's crazy. And that's really bad. I mean, that's evil. There's really no other way to put it in my book.
Did you know of any of the rabbis or any of the other clerics in the state who have come forward, in addition to the cardinal, to speak out against it?
I don't think there was that much push this year, because everybody realized that the game was over once the Democrats took the chamber. I mean, this has been 8 or 9 years. They've been just driving this every single year. And this has been their big thing. And of course, what do they call this? The Reproductive Health Act. The Health Act. And that's just, I can't even. The Health Act.
It makes me sick. I think probably we should change the subject. I'm now, my blood pressure has risen to the point of talking about unhealthy. We could talk about Coulter, because she gets my blood pressure going. So let's
do it.
And Coulter, right. So I'm going to talk about shutdown politics. So, I guess the president caved, or one tweet I saw said he went for a wall but got a cave. We got a cave, or something to that effect. Came out and announced, 3 weeks, let's call it, I don't know what we're going to call it, a truce, a hiatus, a breathing, whatever it is. But Ann Coulter came out moments after the president did that, after his Rose Garden remarks, and compared President Trump to George Herbert Walker Bush, the late hero George Herbert Walker Bush, and said Trump is now a bigger wimp than George Herbert Walker Bush. And I don't even know where to go with that. It's so stupid and low class. And I've never been a fan of hers, to be honest. I mean, you and I try not to rip people by name here, but in this particular case, I just can't help it. I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know who her constituents are, but what's the point of something like that, Billy? What, just to get Trump to change his mind? Why would you bring up particularly moments after we just buried this hero and everybody in the country said, God, we really miss leaders like that? And to have this? What a low class.
And not even to mention that Bush was the youngest fighter pilot in the Second World War, the youngest American fighter pilot. But, when I saw it, I kind of laughed at Ann Coulter, because I remember in my teens and in my early 20s noticing that there were some women that just knew how to play men by going to their egos. And they would be, you'd be at a bar and there'd be some women that would stir up a bar fight, and you just watch it happen. They'd say, that guy's looking at you funny, you know, that kind of thing. And they push it, and, you know, he must think, I mean, she seems to go right to that. And she calls him a wimp, and she calls him, you know, she uses all the stuff, and he tends to respond to that. But she's built a whole career out of that. And she goes men incredibly well, which kind of makes me laugh to some extent as a guy, because, you know, I can see falling into that game where, you know, we can keep sucking into that so easily. But when she did the thing with Bush, I mean, that's just outrageous. I'm not a fan, and I've met her a couple of times, and I've seen her at events, but I don't go over to talk, because to me, what she does and how she makes money is so cheap. It's so easy. It's just so superficial, and it's unhealthy ultimately. But she's done well with it.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Does she still get draw a big crowd wherever she goes, and does she still draw big ratings when she's on the air? Because I don't know anyone who follows her or who supports her, and I certainly stay far away from. I don't like her tone. I don't like the substance of what she has to say. I hate the fact that she's such one of the most visible conservative faces out there, particularly as a woman.
Yeah, she does. The last time I saw her in person was at a Republican dinner in New York. It was a few years ago, and there was still a crowd around her. You know, people looking for the autographs. She was, you know, she was definitely the star in the room. So I think that's continued to some extent, and maybe to a greater extent now, because she's been, you know, pulling this off. But the thing with somebody like Ann Coulter or Roger Stone, who you know very well and have worked against, is that they have to, you know, or the, you know, the InfoWars, Alex Jones, or, you know, any of these rabble-rousers, is they have to constantly gin it up to stay relevant. And so she's probably in her glory right now. And to some extent, Stone may be in his glory right now, because they're just addicted to the press. And, you know, you've seen that. I mean, you worked on the press side for a whole bunch of years, and some people just get hooked on it. And they don't care what personal cost comes with it. They need the juice. They need to be out there. And she's, you know, she's the it girl again right now, even though half the people hate her for it or more than that. So, I don't, you know, interesting.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway? You know, to some extent, I do acknowledge the point that Trump is saying a lot of the Trump loyalists, that it's really unfair to him. I mean, he pulls back and says, okay, we'll do it your way, Nancy. And he just can't win either way. And I definitely get that. But, and I think she will pay a price if this thing falls apart again. But he seems to be, to me, in a really bad position these days. Like even a worse position than I think anyway, that a lot of people believe. He seems, you know, I think he's got a real hole in the balloon. And it's going to be tough for him to go forward in a strong way. You get that sense as well?
Well, I think I don't know if there was actually a strategy behind what he did all along, or if he was just winging it, saying, I'm going to stick to my guns because this is my campaign pledge and I'm not going to budge on principle. It's interesting. I read over the weekend that he deputized Jared Kushner to be the lead on the whole negotiation, and I don't know what the playbook was, but clearly something went terribly wrong. I am curious. Has it been confirmed what actually brought him to the center here, or brought him to make some kind of at least short-term compromise? Really, was it the air traffic controllers? Because that was pretty scary. Suddenly, LaGuardia was not taking any incoming flights. You know, you started to see some very serious ramifications from the shutdown. I don't get the.
That was it. Yeah, as soon as LaGuardia shut down, it was over. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's his get out of jail free card now on this? I mean, he now seems to be doubling down on the I'll shut it down again threat that he made the other day. And I saw Mick Mulvaney this weekend saying the same thing. They don't get what we want, but I don't know what motivation Nancy Pelosi has to meet him halfway, a third of the way. I don't. What does make me absolutely insane though about these Democrats is that they have in the past, as we've discussed, supported funding for a wall, not just for border security, but for a wall. And the idea that now they actually dismiss that as all, like I said, immoral, un-American, that's not who we are. It's all a bunch of nonsense. But I'll tell you, Nancy Pelosi has done a masterful job. I think she has in the last 6 weeks. And pulling together, just even getting her own caucus in line, which is something Paul Ryan could never do. It's fierce. And I don't know who the president has with him, either inside the White House or down on the Hill, who's actually going to help him get through the next 6 or 9 months. But he looks like he's very much alone. Very much alone.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and I think he's going to have to give her a lot. And her numbers, apparently her poll numbers or her conference's poll numbers, took a hit as well. Not as much as the president's numbers were hit, but there's no incentive for her to give in. You're right. I think she probably knows that she can hold out. There could be another shutdown, or he'll do the national emergency that'll turn into a crazy court battle, and ultimately he'll lose more than they will. And she knows that. Trump can get something done here if he were to not be Trump. If he were to be willing to take the hit and say, listen, this is a bad situation. There's to really sit down and talk to the American people. He doesn't have to be the tough guy every time. He could do it, but it's so against his character that I don't see how he does it. But he could say, come on, let's all work together and play that middle ground. His base will stick with him. He may lose Ann Coulter, but that's not going to cost him that much. There's that 37% seems to be the absolute, basement for him, at least up until this point. But I think he could get somewhere, but I just don't see it happening. It's not his way. It's not, Miller's way. It's not his administration's way. And I think Pelosi is counting on that. But it's going to be an ugly few weeks. I don't think there's any question there.
Well, what do you think about the intersection of the Democrats who are running for president? So let's start with all the women in the Senate who've come forward so far. We've got Warren, Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and who am I forgetting? We haven't heard from Klobuchar yet. And actually the Democrats' agenda on the Hill, and if they're going to be in conflict at all or not. We're talking about the Senate versus the House here, but how much is the left going to really drive the agenda?
I think that's a great question. That takes those votes right off the table. I think the left completely drives that agenda. I think that's right. I don't think Gillibrand really matters. I think that she's, she can't be underestimated, and she's talented in her own way, but she is not a heavyweight. And I don't see her I don't see her going very far at all. I think Kamala Harris is probably the one to keep an eye on in that group. I think Warren is making a fool of herself. I think she looks ridiculous. The beer commercial. She just. I don't think that's going to go. I don't think that's playing. But it's definitely going to infect Washington and affect the way these things go down. Although in the Senate, it doesn't matter quite as much because there are other votes available. But, Trump's really got to find a way to dig out of this. And he's got, I still think, Liz, that the reason he did this wall move at the end of the year, because, frankly, as everyone says, he had 2 years to do it with Republicans and didn't do it. I think he did it because of the Mueller news that had come out in late December. And I think it was just one distraction that was available to him. He knew that he could sideline the conversation. And I think he jumped in without playing out the math all the way. And it caught up with him. He has made many, many, many mistakes as a businessman, we know, being New Yorkers. He's blown more businesses than he succeeded at. And his greatest strength is that he keeps going anyway. He just never stops. And maybe that will get him out of this. But he just walked into this one. Anyone that has been around Washington for a long time, you spend a lot more time in Washington than I ever have. You could see that the chess move wasn't there. It was going to run into this.
Yep.
So I don't know what he does.
I don't either. Like I said, I don't know who's putting the strategy together for the next 2 weeks. What do you think the opportunity for, so Nancy Pelosi invited the president formally to deliver the State of the Union next week, February 5th. What do you think his tone and the message is then? And I just can't imagine what's going to happen in that chamber with the protest, standing up and turning their backs to him, booing, not applauding. Good Lord.
Yeah, I know what I think it should be, which is the conciliatory. Take show some humility. Acknowledge that you didn't win in the early one, but then talk about the security issue generally, and show that you're wide open as much as possible, and let Pelosi be the bad person, which he's almost guaranteed to be. But I don't think that's where he's going to go, because he's listening to Steve Miller, and Miller just seems to be kind of bullheaded and just wants to. They like the friction, and they're looking to push the first friction. But you're so right on this, Liz, because everybody agrees on the wall issue. Like Trump has already said, obviously we're not going to go see the shining sea. There are physical barriers that exist where we wouldn't be putting the wall. And so we want to put the wall or fencing or whatever it's called, you want to call it, up in the places where it's appropriate. And then you want to enhance the E-Verify system. And then you want to there's a whole series of things you would roll out that I think everyone pretty much agrees with. And I guess the question is whether Trump's really willing to do the DACA and throw DACA into that. But there is a deal that could be made, but nobody seems to want to make it. And I'm afraid you're right, Liz, from what you said before. And I'm repeating myself, but Pelosi doesn't have the incentives. She, it's hurting him more than her conference, and so she may not let anything go anywhere and just wreck it. And that's probably likely.
Yep, I think that's probably likely too.
Yeah.
Interesting that you said that his tone should be conciliatory. That would be unusual. Right. Of course, he's not going to apologize, and nor do I think he should apologize. I don't know if you think he should apologize.
No, I think you should apologize for about 7,000 things, but not that. not that one.
That's right. You and I agreed. So let's shift gears for a second, because we had Lauren Noble on last week, or was it the week before? I can't even remember. To talk about the Buckley program. It was last week. To talk about the Buckley program and all the wonderful ideas that were going to come from these young brainiacs this past weekend.
That's right. I was very fortunate to be able to be a judge in that for the second year in a row. It was held on Saturday, 2 days ago, last Saturday in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. It's a beautiful place up on the water, and I just went in for the judging. But it's really an amazing contest, and it's open to people from all over the country. You don't have to go to Yale to be in it, and it's open to college students and non-college students, to anybody, to put forth the best conservative ideas. And there were, a couple hundred that were submitted this year. 4 were in the finals. There's a $10,000 award for the top one. I think it's 5 and 2,500, maybe 1,000. So it ain't beanbag. I mean, there's a nice reward there. And so there was a really good crowd at the dinner afterwards, and each of the presenters came up and spent about 20 minutes walking through his or her idea. And it went from, interesting stuff. One person who was one of the winners talked about mandating that states do a cost analysis of what federal block grants will ultimately cost taxpayers in those states before accepting them, which is a pretty interesting idea. Another person had some ideas about doing water preservation and enhancement in the western states at the local level rather than federally, and it's some pretty interesting data there. Another person who ultimately won wanted to put in a civics curriculum, American civics curriculum, into Common Core, which was very interesting. It's our job is to point out the downsides here, the problems, but it was fresh, original thinking from some very, very bright people and a really, really big audience. Like it was webcast, live webcast around, for whoever wanted to watch it. It's also you can probably see the program if you go to buckleyprogram.org, I'm sure they have the video of it, but it's a great contest and it's going to be open next year as well. So anybody listening, it doesn't have to be the Yale Brainiac. It could be, it's anybody that has an idea that wants to submit one and you have a thought that will make the country better and not bankrupt us in the meantime, put it in because it was really fun. And I really thought, Liz, that I think you would have won it with one of the ideas. Really, I was going to call you on the way back, and I called you on the way back last year and said you need to submit your HARPA idea, and I think that's brilliant. I'm not sure if you're allowed to talk about that on the air. Are you? Because it makes so much sense.
Oh, thanks for asking.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a few minutes. I'd love you to talk about that because that, to me, is the best idea I've heard in a lot of years in the country. Could you walk us through it?
Thank you for asking. So, for those of you who are listening, you may be familiar with the DARPA. You should be if you're not. It's an acronym that stands for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It was started under President Eisenhower in 1958, really as a division of the Department of Defense in response to Sputnik. Eisenhower couldn't believe that we were caught flat-footed and we were beaten into space. And he turned around and he said, why aren't we developing, the most state-of-the-art technologies for national security? How can we be beat by the Soviet Union, or the Soviet Union at the time? So he set up this agency that does very high impact, typically people say high risk, high reward, but it's more than that. It's really more high impact investments into fundamental technologies that have broad applications. So, for example, DARPA really started the internet. They started ARPANET so that computers could talk to each other and we could share information. All the Siri, voice technology, was a DARPA development. GPS, night vision goggles, and on and on and on. So robotics.
Right, mammography?
So we don't have right now the same vehicle in the federal government that can turn basic research into product. We have foundational research that's done by the NIH and several other federal agencies, and also done in the private sector. But we don't have any way to turn all of that foundational knowledge into basically products that will help our health, and whether it's life-saving, drugs, therapies, curative treatments, or just technologies. And in our case, so we came forward. I worked with Bob Wright, who was the vice chairman of GE and the chairman of NBC Universal for a long time, and he also founded Autism Speaks. After his wife died of pancreatic cancer, we decided to launch a foundation in her name, really because we were so outraged that there has, in 50 years, hasn't been any improvement in the mortality rate for pancreatic cancer. There's no detection test. It's just impossible to believe that we have not developed a detection test the way we have a colonoscopy and a mammography and a PSA test, nothing for pancreatic cancer. Well, one of the biggest discoveries we found, first of all, was that DARPA had done some of the best breast imaging technology ever done, because they used CIA mapping technologies to do it, so that actually the federal government could do something like this if we got out of this sort of model that we're using just for basic scientific research. But also that there are so many other diseases that don't have any detection tests. ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, glioblastoma. So we put together a proposal to President Trump and HHS, and we've also been working on the Hill to try to get support to set up HARPA. It's the same acronym, Advanced Research Projects Agency, but with an H for health. And again, it would live within HHS, just like DARPA lives within DOD. But what would make it magic, which is what makes DARPA work, is the ecosystem is a public-private. You leverage all the federal research assets that we have, both financial but also clinical research assets, with all the tools and technologies of the private sector. Biotech companies, pharma, venture capital money, philanthropic money, and then also work with the other federal agencies outside the NIH. You get the FDA to the table, you get the VA, and really set up projects to develop technologies that can serve a huge population. So that's our goal. And it's funny because as a Republican, I'm always saying, we want to cut the size of the government, which we do, and shrink, and less is more. But what we also need to do is leverage assets that we have and leverage our investments. And the taxpayers every single year fund billions of dollars, billions. In the case of the NIH this year, it's going to be $39 billion in scientific research, a lot of which doesn't get translated into life-saving products for patients. And one of the other reasons we can justify this, Billy, is because the federal government would be one of the biggest beneficiaries, because if you detect disease early, you save billions of dollars and millions of lives, most importantly, in treatment. Medicaid, Medicare are paying for treatments for diseases that we don't catch until they're very late stage. So here, if we had, let's imagine a next generation MRI machine that could detect pancreatic cancer or glioblastoma or ALS right, at a microscopic level. You could start interventions, immediately. So we've been working on a number of projects, one also that's opioid related, but the whole concept here, like I said, is to leverage the assets and the investments we've already made with the federal government, but really is to get the most out of what's going on in the private sector. We have not applied a lot of the advances we've made in medical innovation to treat the kinds of diseases that are still left. Like I said, pancreatic cancer just being one of them, but no detection tests and no curative treatments for all those major diseases is staggering. So it's been really, really exciting. We've gotten some great support. Secretary Mnuchin's been very helpful. We've met with the Vice President, basically everyone up and down the administration, OMB. And now we're deep in the halls of HHS, and I have my fingers crossed. That's all I can say about that.
It seems to make so much sense. I mean, you're getting rid of so much red tape, and you have all this information in it sounds like in various silos. Why not create a single silo where it could be shared? And I mean, it seems. I mean, obviously, you work with DARPA. It just seems to me a no-brainer.
I mean, it's unconscionable to me that there's so much valuable research that we've done that literally sits on a shelf. It's in publications. The whole system we have now, as you know, you reward publications and white papers and journals, and that is not getting to patients. I mean, that's the bottom line: is the research isn't getting to patients. It's certainly been the case with addiction. I know a lot about that through the work I've been doing with Shatterproof. Story after story, you hear these parents find out long after they've lost a child or a loved one to addiction that we know what works, we know what interventions will work, but no one's delivering this to clinicians and doctors who are on the front lines to treat patients, and it goes on and on from disease to disease. We
should do a show on that, Liz. I would love to do a show on addiction in general. I think that would be a terrific show.
Well, let's
do. You think Shatterproof?
Oh, I'm sure they would love to do it. And Gary's been the founder of Shatterproof's really been a force in helping shape both, the congressional approach, and also the White House approach to addiction. But probably more importantly, the organization has been working with insurance companies and treatment providers and payers to try to get, to reform the system so that we can really help people who are living with addiction now. And then they've got to work on the prevention side, of course.
Yeah, I think we could also get our mutual friend Julie Killian on, who was Lieutenant Governor candidate in New York State last year, who has worked in this area quite a bit too. I think that would be a great show.
She is terrific. That's a really good idea. It's a great idea.
We are actually out of time for this week. That went really fast, didn't it?
Well, you went from pain to this.
No, maybe a couple minutes over. Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
Liz, I'm so glad you got a chance to talk to that. I think to me that conversation, this is just an opener to that conversation, because that's a really great idea, and I'd love to hear more about where it's going or how it's progressing, or if there's any way that listeners can help with it, because that sounds to be something that everybody could agree on, all sides of the aisle.
It's so true. It's not partisan. We've got support across the board on the Hill, and listen, this is an idea that's been percolating for years. Really, and just for a lot of reasons, it hasn't made it as far, frankly, as it has now. We've got people lined up behind it, but Jeff Ling, the guy from DARPA who started the biotech division there, has been a key, not only advocate for it, but architect for what HARPA could look like. And we should have him on, Billy, because he can rock everybody for an hour, far beyond what I could do.
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. So that's great. But anyway, so it's all that. Yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah,
that's great.
Sign up for immediate release, and we'll talk to you guys next Monday at 9 p.m.
Great.
Thank you, Liz.
Good night.
His grace on thee, he crowned not good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood.